Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Ashlie Meredith, Head of Education at MouseBelt. Ashlie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for interviewing me, Yonah.
Well, I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to learn about who you are and what MouseBelt Education really does. So maybe you want to start off and give the audience a little bit of background about who you are and kind of how you got into blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined the MouseBelt team mid-2018 after working with the team for years building startups in Silicon Valley. I was in graduate school. I have a master's degree in philosophy, and in my previous life was teaching philosophy courses at universities. And when the team, felt like there was this opportunity, this lack of blockchain developers in the space and these projects that really needed help getting built, they had the idea to launch their own accelerator. And they had this intuition that there's a lot of talent at universities and there might be students with good startups that we could funnel into our accelerator program. So with my experience, 12 plus years teaching and tutoring at the university level, they tapped me to come on and help develop this university program. So in the summer of 2018, we spent a month just interviewing students, professors, administrators, just to figure out what's going on at as far as blockchain at universities. And what I found was a lot of student demand, a lot of interest in blockchain and Bitcoin, and students who were wanting more classes, and universities are just kind of slow, bureaucratic, weren't able to meet the demand always. Students were teaching their own courses, student facilitated courses. And so it was really, we saw this grassroots movement and immediately wanted to support students directly. So we were just sponsoring their events, hackathons, visiting them on their campuses, building online educational platform with 3 different courses. So students can learn and dive in on the business side, the development side. We've got a great tech team, a development shop of 30, 40 engineers who can build projects. And of course, our investment analysts and the accelerator itself can do entrepreneurial education. And then I like to do this leadership class where I just communicate to students how to confidently and competently use crypto and blockchain, talk about crypto and blockchain, and become a leader in the space, networking, organizing events, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And so, this university program, it sounds really amazing because like you mentioned, when you first checked it out, it seemed like there really was a lack of offerings for students from the universities, especially when it came to blockchain. Has that improved since? Are universities getting more on board with blockchain and starting to teach it more on the formal level?
Yeah, absolutely. It might be a little slow going, but after the last 2.5 years, I kind of keep my ear to the ground with all things blockchain education news. And it's just every day more and more universities are offering degree programs, courses. There's more and more online options and free options. And I encourage anyone tuning in to Reimagine 2020 to check out the university segment interviews that myself and my university team have conducted if you're interested in learning about what is going on right now, especially if students are unable to return to campus. But what I hear from them is that there's just more and more courses being offered at their schools, and they're really motivated right now while they're stuck at home to work on cool projects and build this space. So I would say, yeah, it's been slow going, but over the last 2 years, I've definitely seen an increase.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because one of the problems you mentioned in this sphere is a lack of developers. I mean, it's such a new technology and a very advanced, complex technology, and so we're building up that developer base. But does that lend to the same problem on the teacher end? Are there professors who understand the technology well enough to actually teach these courses to pass on the knowledge to the next generation?
It's interesting to see, some institutions actually have their programs are faculty driven. It's a professor who's really interested in blockchain and it's really driving the courses being taught there. I just did an interview with David Noble at University of Connecticut, and he said that in the beginning, he did kind of an independent study because he wanted to learn blockchain. So I think that it's a great opportunity for professors who want to learn more about blockchain. You can't do better to learn than to teach, right? And it's a great thing to do with students and learn along with them. So while there might be a lack of and because it's such a new technology, there's not a ton of like hardcore PhD researchers working on this, but the ones that are doing really cool stuff. And we've partnered with UC Davis. They have a lab there, and they're constantly applying for grants and launching code and building their own blockchain. So definitely encourage anyone interested in learning more about that space to check out some of our interviews with these professors.
Mm-hmm. And how many universities right now are partnered in or interact with the university program?
Yeah, so initially we engaged directly with students. So we were kind of partnering with their student blockchain organizations. And it's definitely interesting because in the US, there is this culture of student clubs, and it really depends on the type of school. And, if there's a commuter school, there's not a huge like on campus collaborative spirit. People just go to school and go home. So it really depends on the region. But in the US, it's really common for students to create their own clubs and do their own events, and they get a little bit of funding from the school. So we had a lot, and I think just because of our language and our location in California, our schools are definitely concentrated in North America. But so we started with just a couple student groups, 10 in fall of 2018. But when we launched the online educational platform, we just doubled down on our outreach because we knew that people just wanted a good place for people to point them to resources, because there's so much information out there. And we really see ourselves at MouseBelt as like curators of that. Like, here's the best stuff, here's the best projects, take a look at this, right? So we grew to like 60 something student clubs. But often students interact with us who don't go to the kind of school that has a club, or it's just one professor who wants to start teaching a class. And we've had professors use our syllabi to guide their, business of blockchain classes and things like that. In total, as far as people who have engaged in some way, logged onto our platform, or, applied for a pitch competition, it's about 100 schools in 24 countries.
Wow. Wow, it's really impressive, the massive growth that you guys have accomplished in such a short time. And it's interesting because, when you're dealing with universities, it's mostly formal education. And what is the biggest challenge when it comes to teaching blockchain in a formal setting? It is such a new technology, and it's innovating so quickly. Is there a kind of an issue that you run into where, by the time they get the book, by the time they get the curriculum, it's already outdated?
Yeah, it's exactly that kind of problem. The traditional academic model just isn't going to work for an emerging technology. You can't rely on a textbook that's going to be out of date. And so I think what I would encourage professors to do, or institutions to do, is more industry and academy collaboration, by working with people like MouseBelt, or joining some of our events or watching these videos. They can stay up to date, right? And follow the industry trends and make sure that they're creating educational content that's going to be valuable to their students, because most of them are thinking about, I'm going to use this for my career. And it's a pretty lucrative career right now. Blockchain developers can make quite a bit in salary, and it's an exciting technology that people are really interested in getting involved in. So I think if universities want to do their students a service and adequately prepare them for these careers, they should work in collaboration with industry and stay up on all these industry trends and welcome guest speakers or developers from different protocols to come do workshops in their classes.
And especially if you're talking about collaborating with industries, MouseBelt has as part of started the Blockchain Education Alliance, and you have some major industry players in there. You guys just announced AB InBev, ING, Rolls-Royce. What kind of what advantage does that give to the students who want to learn through MouseBelt Education? The fact that you are partnered with such industry leaders, what does that enable you to then pass on to the university students?
Yeah, just being in conversations with these people, and we do monthly meetings. We do this REIMAGINE conference. I send out newsletters about what students are up to, just kind of putting our flag in the sand and saying, here's a rallying point for all things blockchain education. If you want to talk about it, if you want to do a work group, if you want to ask my experience with virtual hackathons, whatever it is, we can talk about it and try to connect you to the right people. And yeah, so we were working largely with students. Slowly we started talking to more administrators and professors, and only recently last fall decided, why don't we bring some industry partners in? I'm sure, you know, most of them have the desire to bring more developers into their ecosystem. And so I see my role as, you know, trying to communicate to them the best ways to do that, and that they need to make this long-term investment in education. Because it is more of a long game, right? You're not going to see immediate benefit from investing in education, but for the space as a whole, overall, and over more time, and the longevity of it, I think relies on these kind of long-term investments in education. So we invited, you know, all the partners. We started with some of the platforms and protocols that we have built with, either through our engineering shop or, you know, just being on the ground in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, going to meetups for the last few years. We've made some great relationships with these major blockchain protocols, you know, Ripple, Icon, Stellar, Hedera, and then more recently, because of our engineering efforts, have been discovering there's a lot of innovation teams at traditional enterprise companies that are exploring blockchain. So like you said, AB InBev, Rolls-Royce, you know, banking institutions, ING Bank, these not traditionally blockchain companies, a lot of them for the last 5 years or so have been experimenting with proofs of concept and pilots to, you know, bring blockchain into supply chain. And they have, you know, they have their own hackathons and innovation garages and labs. So they're really interested in getting students working on this, on these projects as well. So yeah, I just see it as like a massive resource pool of, you know, insight, funding, and some of our partners have responded to, you know, this new environment and run virtual hackathons where we offer our acceleration services at MouseBelt Accelerator as a prize to like the top prizes for these virtual hackathons. We can work with them virtually to take their projects to the next level, or get them to the point where they're ready to commercialize maybe.
Very cool. And you know, if you look at traditional industry, you know, and especially the universities in America, the way it's set up, the top universities funnel, you know, the top workforce into the top companies. So for instance, you know, if I'm a top law firm, I already know for 100 years, I'm going to go look at the graduates of Harvard, of Yale, of Princeton, and with engineering, MIT, and as such. But with blockchain, it's so new, there really hasn't been established yet kind of this hierarchy of education, this hierarchy of talent pool. And so, you know, how is MouseBelt trying to fill that gap? I mean, what is a possible solution, and how does it look to kind of marry, you know, the top companies who are looking for top talent and these, you know, these grade A university students who are at the forefront of the blockchain talent pool, but there's no connect yet?
Yeah, you bring up something that is definitely always on my mind. One thing that I try to talk to these companies about is that, you know, obviously the coastal regions in the US get a lot of attention as far as their blockchain programming at universities. We all know that MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, they're probably doing cool stuff, right? They have the funding for it, but I really encourage them to take a look at these other schools, which I have discovered through working on MouseBelt University, which is that there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in emerging markets like Latin America and Africa. There are regional and state schools in the US that are doing really great stuff in blockchain. And I think it's also an opportunity for university administrators at smaller state schools who want to make a name for themselves in some industry. This is an opportunity right now to be like, you can be a really great state school and have a great blockchain program. There's no reason some of these smaller institutions can't really lead the way. So definitely, you know, look beyond the top 10 schools in the world for where blockchain talent can come from. And I really hope that they will think of MouseBelt as a place to, you know, share their internships and job postings, and maybe even ask for recommendations. Anyone tuning in to Reimagine 2020, our last series, we did a panel called Breaking into Blockchain, and it was about 4 or 5 former MouseBelt students, or, you know, students I've worked with over the last 2 years who now have jobs at places like The Block, Crypto Briefing, VC funds, and internships. So just if you want to get any tips or tricks or hear about some of our talented students who have gone on to get real jobs in the blockchain industry at companies that we're familiar with, check that out. But yeah, definitely, you know, I think the big goal is to create this ecosystem and platform that connects talent, infrastructure, and industry. So students and startups, infrastructure, the actual companies in blockchain, and then industry, which we're seeing as we bring on more, you know, enterprise partners and non-blockchain companies into our ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you did mention the MouseBelt Accelerator program. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so we have invested in about 8 companies now in 2 batches, kind of like a traditional accelerator, except we were remote first. We've never had an office that people came to participate in the accelerator. So that's been really exciting to kind of be ahead of what's happening now. We've always, you know, done everything virtual. So people, you can apply to the program, and our investment analysts, you know, will take calls with startups and decide if we want to bring them on. But what we do that's kind of different than a traditional accelerator is that we have the in-house engineering shop. So on top of capital investments in a company, we also invest developer resources. So it might be like a set amount of hours that we're going to spend building the product. And this was kind of born out of the ICO craze, where you know, our team was seeing companies raising tens of millions of dollars and not putting out any code. So he said, we can make smarter investments by kind of forcing these companies to build, because part of the investment is these developer hours. And just really been loving watching that experiment of how you can really get a company to the next level when you invest resources like that. So it's very hands-on. You know, we have business development team, the engineering team, and what's also been really exciting to see is about 20% of our companies have come from student projects that we discovered through this kind of investigation into the talent at universities. You know, we had one company we invested in started out as a grant for one student who had an idea. Another one that I think is a good model for how MouseBelt University ideally works, and how this model works is students from a business school were taking our business of blockchain class and regularly meeting with our investment analysts to get advice, to do like workshops on how to build a pitch deck and all of that. And when they applied for our pitch competition, they impressed the team so much that they brought them onto the accelerator. And you know, these are young people with brilliant ideas, and their idea has even changed since they've been in the accelerator, and we've been able to support them in that, and kind of prove our theory that the earlier we intervene in a company's trajectory, the more we can invest in their success, and that students who have you know, ideas can come and learn more about starting a business and get to a point where they can join an accelerator.
Mm-hmm. And I think you hit upon a really important point where in this field, you know, that whereas the challenge doesn't seem to be mostly capital, but rather developing know-how. You know, it's such a new and complex technology where even if they're raising funds and they're able to go to a VC fund who's going to give them money, that doesn't necessarily fix their issue of this is a tough development problem and I can't fix it. So kudos to you guys for offering that, because I do think that's very needed in the space. And that kind of brings me to my next question, where the services that MouseBelt is providing, is this for, hey, is this only for someone who is, you know, I'm into blockchain, I love blockchain, I need some help, or is it kind of for all spectrums where I have a great idea, I'm into business, but I'm curious to see how blockchain might help? Is there a barrier of entry for blockchain knowledge to kind of get involved in the MouseBelt University program?
A little bit with the engineering course. Just I think that ideally you have like 6 months programming experience before you dive into like actually building blockchain engineering, but that's to be expected. And there's so many good resources out there to get your knowledge of programming up to a point where you can start developing on blockchain. But as far as like the business of blockchain course, you know, we have updated it, you know, every year a little bit to kind of reflect what the market trends are. So if you have no idea, like, well, what are the use cases of blockchain? Does it make sense to make a product that involves blockchain, that's a good place to start. And I would also say, the opposite is true as well. Like you said, that it's not like a lack of funding, it's more about developer know-how. There are a lot of developers who join our program or who are looking for resources who don't have business experience. And I've had a lot of conversations over the last week or so with interviews for REIMAGINE 2020 with this idea of having an entrepreneur's mindset and really understanding customers and what kind of solutions we need, because we think that a lot of projects in blockchain maybe are solutions looking for problems and not the other way around. So being able to train developers to think about customers more and think about UI and UX and adoption and how we're actually going to drive that by some business training, I think is really helpful too.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so nice because you mentioned before how the beginning, it seems like mostly a grassroots growth where it's student organizations who are reaching out and saying, hey, we're interested in blockchain. We want to be more involved. We want courses because it's so young, the technology, that it's not set yet originally. There's not at every university a blockchain degree, and this is the path that you want to go down. So my question is this to you. You probably have really interesting insights into what kind of backgrounds are interested in blockchain right now. Because on one end, you could love coding growing up. You're like, ooh, I really love the computer science behind blockchain. On the other end, you could be really interested in finance and saying, I really love the potential for DeFi here, for interesting new financial tools. So from your experience dealing with these universities and these students, have you seen a common theme? Have you seen a main background that is most interested in blockchain? And also, what is the most surprising background you've seen that is interested in blockchain?
Yeah, so as far as, just a survey of the students that have engaged with our platform, it's what you would expect, right? 60% computer scientists, data scientists, and engineers. But that other 40% is, business, finance, environmental studies majors, law is a big one, and even some philosophers. So that's my background. And I've just really enjoyed being able to talk to people who are new to crypto, because at the end of the day, it's a philosophical conversation. You kind of, to explain cryptocurrency to someone, you kind of have to ask them, how much do you know about what money actually is? Or the concept of stores of value, or this ledger system we created because we needed trust, and how blockchain can take that away. So it becomes a really cool philosophical conversation. And I think that's because of, all the young people who are involved and what we care about when we want to build something. I think it's a bit of this like revolutionary mindset where, we can have a different form of organizing our society, or organizing our companies, or we could execute things with code that would be more fair. I think that's what young people really care about now, and that blockchain is really exciting for them, for its potential to, people have become disillusioned with our government and our financial system. And I think there's this, I think it's an ethics and a revolutionary, exciting idea, and that's what draws people to it, and that's why it draws so many different kinds of people to it. And I love seeing like how many different kinds of people are involved in the space, and really encourage students to not be discouraged if they're not technical. This revolution needs everyone, and blockchain technology is so complicated, and its applications so wide reaching, that we need people who understand people, psychologists, philosophers. We need communicators, people who can communicate the value and import of this technology. So yeah, I think that's why. But it's a very, very varied, what you would expect, a lot of computer science and a lot of technical people, about 60%, but everyone else just runs the whole spectrum.
And for someone who is involved, watching this and interested in blockchain and learning about blockchain, do you recommend a more theoretical approach to learning, where they just read up on the concepts and read the white papers and take that approach, or do you think in this instance it's just a more hands-on approach works? Just try developing, try writing a smart contract, try developing on a blockchain, or a mixture of both.
Yeah, I would say just the best way to learn is by doing, right? So in building these blockchain of business classes and being in the accelerator, I've built even just business plans for businesses that don't exist or are never going to exist, just to understand like how you go through that process. And yeah, and there's lots of great exercises on our online courses. I think we always try to get people at least writing down things they're thinking about, or of course, like actually building an application through the blockchain engineering classes. But definitely hands-on. That's what we're all about at MouseBelt. Hands-on blockchain accelerator. We want to get our hands dirty. We want to actually build your product. We want to put our engineers on it. So yeah, learn by doing for sure.
And one of the reasons why we're having this Reimagine 2020 conference is because the COVID-19, it's kind of forced this remote learning. Everyone has to essentially learn from home. Even universities aren't opening up and students have to learn from home. But what we've seen so far is that it's not as easy as just log on to Zoom. I mean, there is a lot of challenges that come along with remote learning, and especially in the younger ages where they're not there, they're not college students who not always, but necessarily chose to be there. Do you see a potential blockchain solution in this new world that we live in of remote learning, whether to incentivize young students to pay attention by rewarding them in tokens, or maybe even in the test giving somehow to validate tests? I'm not sure, but do you see a role in blockchain with remote learning?
Yeah, I mean, my undergraduate degree was in education. I went on to get a master's degree so I could teach at the university level. I've taught online classes before. I've been interested in pedagogy and special ed and how do we create different accessible educational experiences for people regardless of disability, regardless of ability to show up in person. The new hybrid flexible model you'll probably hear a lot about as schools start to give students the choice to come to campus or not. Starting from the beginning of your course planning, thinking about how can I engage people in person and online, and how are those two experiences really different. And so yeah, I just have a pet interest in educational technology, and it's kind of come up in my career in blockchain, which has been nice. Two of our portfolio companies at MouseBelt, one is started as a degrees on the blockchain but developed into more of like background checks on the blockchain, and then yeah, just different kinds of ways of keeping certificates on the blockchain. So diving into that space, I've been able to see what a huge industry it actually is, how much money and time gets spent or wasted just trying to prove that you have the educational experiences that you do. And it's just like healthcare data. Like, why can't I own my credentials, my healthcare data, any information that is about me? Like, I should be able to have a private key and authorize who I need to share it with, and it should be fast and it should be free or cheap. So those are some of the solutions I'm really excited by, which is just how can we quantify and even qualitative educational experiences? How can we tokenize those things and let people own them and prove them to others if that's what helps them get a job? And then the other thing you mentioned about incentivizing participation or attention in some way, token economics and blockchain allows us to do that. I think the big picture dream is that eventually you would be getting paid to learn instead of the other way around, which is now people getting into hundreds of thousands of student loan debt. I think that with blockchain, there is this potential that you could earn as you learn.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very excited personally for that. Up until Corona, where remote learning kind of, like you mentioned now, that because of it, more universities are more open to a hybrid flexible model where they allow students not to come in. And personally, I went through the formal traditional education system, and maybe you'd appreciate this. I kind of felt like it did not fit me. I was very curious. I wanted to learn, but the traditional system that was set up was not enabled to maximize my learning potential. I had major ADHD, and the system that set up now, that I have to go in, sit in class, sit still, don't move, don't talk, don't act, just have a teacher, spit knowledge at me, and spit knowledge at the same rate to assume that I would learn at the exact same rate, in the exact same way as the other 40 people in my class. If it's a small class, the other 40 people in my class, I think is a ridiculous idea. So I'm very excited by the potential of remote learning to revolutionize the education field for those students who don't necessarily fit in to what has historically and traditionally been the way to teach. So maybe not focus on blockchain, but asking you as a former educator and someone who's interested in education, do you foresee and do you see the potential of education changing for permanently because of Corona, because of the shift towards remote learning? And obviously there will be growing pains to try to the first reaction was to force the traditional learning model into remote learning. But how do you see education changing now that it has become digital? How do you see the future of education taking place?
I mean, I almost see it as the death knell of traditional learning institutions. This is something I've been waiting for a long time, especially as someone who cares about disability justice or has learned a lot about learning disabilities or just wants access and my economic political beliefs and access to opportunity that people do or don't have in the world, have kind of always been like, when is this going to break down? Because it's not serving the function it's supposed to. We forget what the purpose of all of this was. What was the purpose of creating these big buildings and having people go there every day and having a certification system that is all on paper and you have to check all of these boxes to get it. At the end of the day, it's knowledge. It's learning. It's people elevating their lives by creating more opportunities for themselves and feeding that curiosity. And you can do that in so many ways. So I'm really excited to see how, it's a horrible tragedy and it's a really hard adjustment for people, but I think we can take it as an opportunity to really reevaluate, do we need to do it this way? And remote allows for things like asynchronous communication and people to pursue learning at their own pace. And I'd love to see more of that. Self-directed learning. I think there's a lot of things that you really can't replace in face-to-face interactions. I know, philosophy seems like it's pretty hard because it is about a conversation, and ultimately, some of the oldest texts really, right, are just two people asking each other questions. So there's definitely going to be adjustments. And I think there's some topics or there's some fields that are going to be easier to do and learn self-directed or online. And we'll just have to kind of see how comfortable we can get with doing some of it differently. And maybe some things are always going to have to be in person to really get the most benefit out of it. But we can get 80% of the way on so many things and just do them so radically different. So as an educator, yeah, I'm really excited. As someone who believes that education can change people's lives, I'm just happy that it's becoming more accessible and people are more willing to try these more experimental formats.
Well, I mean, for sure, I as someone who believes in education myself, I would love to see education make a change in people's lives other than putting them in hundreds of thousands of student debt. Because that's what it seems like the current system is geared towards, where they're promising knowledge, they're promising to empower the students, but essentially in many cases, students end up very handicapped, especially financially, because of the current system. So, what MouseBelt is doing right now, where it's kind of, empowering students and helping them out in a win-win situation where it's connecting them with industry leaders, with connecting them directly with industry, directly with the places that they're trying to get a job at. Because essentially, that's why we go to school. We go to school to learn, to give us tools, so that then we can then use those tools in the real world. So do you foresee, a model like MouseBelt? Do you see MouseBelt as kind of this leading the charge in this change where, hey, you don't have to go the traditional way, but rather you can go learn because you're interested. You could go to something like MouseBelt, which will empower you and also connect you with the industry that you want to work at eventually.
Absolutely. You know, there's so many resources out there, and there's so many companies doing better jobs than us at creating educational technology, just like the learning management systems, the way to compile information. You know, there's all these tools and softwares out there for that. So I really see our role as just being the line drawn in the sand of this is what we think is important: hands-on learning, self-directed learning, connecting with industry, you know, creating relationships, meeting on Zoom, connecting students to internships and jobs, and that people will rally around that and come meet us there, and we can build from there. And it's been a collaborative process. It's been iterative. Every semester we're kind of doing things differently. So I really feel like this is a student built experiment, and yeah, I just only hope to see it grow, and for people to kind of reimagine the way that they go about getting an education or pursuing a career.
And have you seen interest at other levels besides universities? For instance, have you seen interest at the high school level, where high school students are interested and want to get involved, or even on the flip end, you know, people who are in the middle of their careers, or who are older in age and are curious about blockchain? Could they also take advantage of these tools?
Yeah, right now, just for scaling issues, and because we want to have really high touch relationships with these institutions and the students, we've kept it to just students at actual academic institutions. But my vision is, yeah, to instead of relying on these academic institutions for our connections to students, kind of become our own ecosystem, almost become our own school, which we can then open up to, you know, maybe there's content that we would be appropriate for younger people. I've taught philosophy to high schoolers and media literacy to middle school girls, and I, you know, love working with young people. And I think there is interest in, I mean, I think kids are already using blockchain in gaming, right? I think there would be interest. So big vision is to, you know, create educational content that's appropriate for even younger people, and invite maybe high schoolers into our ecosystem. And then, yeah, the professional who wants this information to maybe they're the blockchain advocate inside of their enterprise company, and they want to start an innovation team where they can start researching and exploring blockchain in their larger non-blockchain company, or someone wants to completely switch careers and just get that information. Yeah, that's the big vision for sure, is to kind of open out in both directions: college students and younger, and professionals.
Mm. And kind of, you know, in that same vein, not just age, but also gender, where we look at, if you look historically at the tech fields, at the coding and tech fields, women have been historically underrepresented, and the same thing if you look right now with blockchain and crypto, where if you look at the numbers, it does seem like men heavily outweigh women in this field. Is there something that can be done at the university level or the education level that can help change that can help get women more interested in the technology and give them more opportunities in the workplace as well?
Yeah, I mean, representation matters, right? I've gotten feedback from students who were really happy to see that I was working at MouseBelt and that I was in a leadership position, because they're not used to seeing women in leadership positions at startups or in technology. So just, I feel like that's one way that I can contribute to the space, is just being here and trying to be a good mentor and I love being able to support young female entrepreneurs and coders. But you know, it's a tough you know, all the same things you can say about any industry or gender or race relations. How do we fix these kind of intractable problems? I come from philosophy, which is the most male dominated field outside of in the world. It's second only to engineering. So it's engineering and then philosophy. And so apparently I really like being in these spaces where maybe I wasn't traditionally welcomed, and kind of opening that space for people. At the university level, you know, I think it's just the same thing. Representation matters. It actually does matter. Your department's hiring history, like who are the professors that you're hiring? What is your percentage of male and female people in leadership in the chair in the department. So all the same problems in any industry where there's a gender imbalance. Look at your hiring practices, and don't be lazy in your either journalism or outreach. Right? There's organizations out there who are helping bring more women into coding or whatever it is, and they're waiting to hear from you. Like, reach out to them. Making conscious decisions about whose work you're highlighting, and recognizing maybe implicit biases. No one is trying to be a mean or bad or sexist or racist person most of the time, right? A lot of this is unconscious, and so you just have to take that little extra step of reminding yourself, like, am I actually seeking out like talented women to talk to and learn from and include in my projects? And yeah, just check yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And it's really amazing to see the amazing work that MouseBelt and the progress that MouseBelt has done so far in such a short period of time. But looking forward, what's next for MouseBelt?
Yeah, so we're all kind of just adjusting to this new reality. Luckily, we have been a remote first team since our inception, so we had a lot less adjusting to do to continue working remotely. But I think we took a pause to reimagine what this year might look like, and really invested in this media project, and that has been so great. We're obviously doing it again, so just more of that, getting better and better at creating media, and I'm really excited about it because I'm a big news junkie and podcast junkie, and to be able to make my own podcasts and my own news has been really fun. So really excited to see more of that. Stay tuned, keep RSVPing for all of our events. I know we have a couple more coming up this year. For MouseBelt University, like I said, the vision is to start expanding our educational materials to include, blockchain and law mini courses, DeFi, stuff that might be appropriate for younger audiences or professionals. And then, continuing to find new ways to connect talent, infrastructure, and industry. So we have, meetings coming up with our Blockchain Education Alliance to kind of reevaluate. I think in the past we were focusing on how we could do career fairs at college campuses where blockchain weeks were happening, and it was all kind of centered around traveling for conferences, and that's not really going to happen anymore. So I think it is going to be still a little bit more exploratory and experimental, where we are just discussing different ways to engage and connect people, and then trying those out through things like REIMAGINE 2020. I've been doing debates with students every week where we talk about kind of current events in blockchain. So we'll report back as we kind of try a lot of new things towards the end of the year, and hopefully figure out what works in this new environment.
Well, looking at the track record, I'm really excited to see what's in store going forward for MouseBelt. So Ashlie, thank you so much for taking the time and really, peeling back the veil to kind of show everyone what's really going on behind the scenes and the amazing work that you guys are doing on a university level and in an industry level. So thanks for taking the time. And for all our viewers at REIMAGINE 2020, I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks for watching.